A man sits on the cold sidewalk, his back pressed against the rough brick wall of an abandoned building. His coat is torn, his shoes barely holding together, and his hands tremble from the chill in the air. People walk past him without a second glance. Some grip their bags a little tighter. Others speed up their pace, as if his suffering might be contagious. He doesn't ask for money. He doesn't even speak. He simply stares at the ground, lost in his own world, a world of hunger, exhaustion, and isolation. This isn't a rare scene. In cities across America, this is daily life for hundreds of thousands of people. Tonight, more than 500,000 individuals in the United States will sleep in shelters, on sidewalks, in abandoned buildings, or in makeshift tents. Some will be hidden from sight, curled up in cars, huddled under bridges, or tucked away in alleys where they hope to find some semblance of safety. Homelessness is not just a crisis. It is a defining issue of modern America. It exists in every state, in every city, and in every small town, growing year after year with no real solution in sight. But how did we get here? How did the wealthiest country in the world end up with such a widespread and persistent crisis? Why do so many Americans have nowhere to call home? The problem isn't just about a lack of shelter. It's about an economy that has left millions behind, a system that punishes poverty rather than alleviates it, and a government that has failed to address the root causes of homelessness. This is not just a story of statistics or policies. This is a story of real people, mothers, fathers, veterans, children, and elderly citizens, each with their own struggles, their own battles, and their own heartbreaks. This is the harsh reality of homelessness in America. The many faces of homelessness. When people think of homelessness, they often picture the same image: an older man with a scruffy beard, possibly struggling with addiction, holding a cardboard sign on a street corner. But this image only tells a fraction of the story. The reality of homelessness in the U.S. is far more complex, and the people experiencing it come from every background imaginable. There is the single mother who once had a steady job and a safe apartment for her children. After an unexpected layoff, she fell behind on rent, and within a few months, she and her kids were living in her car, showering at gas stations, and hoping to find space in an overcrowded shelter. There is the teenage runaway who fled an abusive home, trading the terror of domestic violence for the dangers of sleeping on park benches and subway trains. There is the elderly woman who spent her life working, only to find that her Social Security check no longer covers the rising cost of rent, leaving her with no option but a tent on the sidewalk. There is the veteran who once served his country, risking his life overseas, only to return home to a system that fails him at every turn. Struggling with PTSD and unable to find work, he spirals into a cycle of instability, eventually losing everything. And there are the working poor, people with jobs who still can't afford a place to live. They work in restaurants, retail stores, warehouses, and construction sites, yet their wages barely cover food, let alone rent. Some sleep in their cars. Others stay in cheap motels when they can afford it. Many move from couch to couch, hoping for a break that never comes. These are not isolated cases. These are the faces of homelessness in America. They are not all drug addicts. They are not all mentally ill. Many are simply victims of an economy that has made survival a privilege rather than a guarantee. The root causes of homelessness. Homelessness is not just the result of bad choices. It is the outcome of a system that leaves too many people behind. The causes are deep, systemic, and often ignored by those in power. The most obvious factor is the cost of housing. Across the country, rent prices have skyrocketed, far outpacing wages. In many cities, even a full-time minimum wage job is not enough to afford a modest apartment. For millions of Americans, one financial setback, a medical bill, a job loss, a family emergency, can be the difference between stability and life on the streets. Lack of affordable housing is just one piece of the puzzle. Mental illness and addiction also play a role, but not in the way many people assume. The truth is, most homeless individuals do not start out with these struggles. Many develop mental health issues after becoming homeless, due to the trauma, stress, and isolation that come with living on the streets. Addiction, too, is often a response to homelessness rather than the cause of it. When people lose everything, when they have no hope and no support, substance abuse can become a way to numb the pain. Another major factor is the failure of social safety nets. Decades of budget cuts to mental health services, affordable housing programs, and emergency shelters have left countless people without a lifeline. In the past, individuals struggling with severe mental illness might have had access to stable treatment facilities. Today, many are left to fend for themselves, often cycling in and out of hospitals and jails with no permanent solution. The criminalization of homelessness makes the problem even worse. Instead of providing help, many cities treat homelessness as a crime, arresting people for sleeping in public spaces, issuing fines they can't pay, and dismantling tent encampments without offering alternative housing. These tactics do nothing to solve the issue. They only push people further into desperation. Surviving the streets. Life on the streets is not just difficult, it is dangerous. Homeless individuals are constantly at risk, not just from the elements, but from violence, illness, and exploitation. Women face an especially high risk of assault and abuse, and many are forced to choose between unsafe shelters or the dangers of sleeping in public. The winter months bring the deadly threat of hypothermia, while the summer heat can be just as fatal. Basic necessities like food, clean water, and hygiene are often out of reach. Even finding a safe place to sleep can be a daily struggle. Many are forced to move constantly, avoiding law enforcement, hostile business owners, and others who see them as a nuisance rather than a human being in need. Yet, in the face of these hardships, the homeless community finds ways to survive. They rely on each other, forming makeshift families and support networks. They share food, look out for one another, and help newcomers navigate the brutal realities of life on the streets. But survival is not enough. A person should not have to fight for basic dignity in a country that claims to value freedom and opportunity. The path forward. The solutions to homelessness are not mysteries. Other countries have managed to drastically reduce homelessness through a combination of affordable housing, mental health services, and social programs designed to catch people before they fall. Yet in the United States, these solutions are ignored in favor of temporary fixes that do little to address the core issue. Building more shelters is not enough. Criminalizing homelessness is not the answer. The real solution lies in long-term systemic change, policies that ensure housing is a right, not a privilege. If America is to truly address homelessness, it must start by acknowledging that this is not just a problem of individual failure. It is a failure of the system itself. Until housing is affordable, until wages rise to meet the cost of living, until mental health care is accessible to all, and until we stop treating homelessness as a crime rather than a crisis, nothing will change. The man on the sidewalk, the mother in her car, the teenager in the alley, they are not just statistics. They are people, they have stories, they have dreams, they have the same hopes and fears as anyone else, and they deserve better. Homelessness is not inevitable. It is not unsolvable. It is a choice made by a society that prioritizes profits over people. But choices can change, policies can change, and most importantly, perspectives can change. The question is, will they? Or will America continue to walk past the suffering on its streets, pretending not to see?